Otis proposed yesterday, and I fell for the handsome guy who delivered the gifts to the Otis family. My parents almost dropped their jaws. After all, I've been Otis's biggest fan since I was a kid. Yesterday, I was still chasing after him, forcing him to marry me. Reluctantly, he agreed to propose today, but they don't know I've just been reborn. In my previous life, Otis gave me the title of wife, but left me alone in an empty house, and I died of depression after only 3 years. The day after I died, he immediately married his first love. I didn't know until then that he had been sleeping with someone else every night after we got married. Since that's the case in this new life, I'll just let them be. Later, when my young stepdad held me and asked Otis to call me stepmom, he turned black. "Zoe, how could you marry someone else?" 1. On the day of the engagement banquet, I ran into Otis at a luxury boutique while he was looking at wedding dresses. The saleswoman beside him looked at me with undisguised contempt. "Miss Zoe again? How many times have you looked at that haute couture wedding dress? Are you ready to buy it this time? I'm not saying this to you, but why don't you settle your sweetheart first? Otherwise, we who work here will suffer too." Otis's expression of disgust became even more obvious when he heard this. "Zoe, do you have any shame? You come to look at wedding dresses every day. Are you afraid that others don't know you can't get married? What bad luck I have. If it wasn't for my grandfather forcing me to marry you, I wouldn't let them go to your house to propose." His words were not private, and soon a burst of laughter rang out around him. Humiliated by him in public, my nose turned sour. Steadied my mind, I slowly raised my head. "Since it wasn't you who proposed, I won't marry you either." The saleswoman rolled her eyes. "Miss Zoe, don't be too demanding. Be careful that the dowry you just received will be taken back by others, and you won't be able to wear the wedding dress." Otis was also stunned for a moment, then stiffened his neck in even more disgust. "Zoe, you were the one who was eager to marry me. Don't expect me to coax you. And you've already received the dowry from the Otis family. Who else can marry you besides me? Why don't you say you won't marry me when you were chasing after me and forcing me to marry you? What are you pretending now? Just fool the ghosts with this." He adjusted his suit cuff and passed by me, warning me in a voice that only the two of us could hear. "You can buy any wedding dress you want, but don't even think about the title of my wife." I was stunned. In my previous life, Otis's grandfather forced Otis and me to get a marriage certificate, and although he neglected me later, I was his wife until I died. Looking at his receding figure, I suddenly began to wonder if he had been reborn too. Bang! Just as I was lost in thought, I was knocked down from behind and fell hard to the ground. "Alina, are you okay?" I looked up in pain, and Otis supported Alina with concern, checking her for injuries. "Sister Zoe, I'm sorry. I just wanted to congratulate you. I'm sorry. I'm just an outsider." Alina's eyes were getting redder and redder, and Otis glared at me fiercely when he saw it. "What are you doing lying there? Alina is so weak, how could she knock you down? Do you really think no one can see through your scheming heart?" 2. The next second, ignoring the surrounding gazes, Otis directly pulled Alina's hand and kissed the red mark on her wrist. Cheers erupted one after another, and they quickly became the focus of the entire counter. The saleswoman who had been leading Otis around earlier scanned me up and down mockingly. "Miss Zoe, are you still looking at wedding dresses?" The laughter grew louder, and more people in the store came to watch. It was no longer news that I was chasing Otis, and they all craned their necks, waiting to see me cry and make a fuss to attract Otis's attention as I used to. Otis, with Alina in his arms, also looked at me, as if waiting for me to come to him crying. But I just got up and rubbed my bruised knee, and I didn't make a sound from beginning to end. A flash of surprise crossed Otis's eyes, and then he returned to his usual disgust. "You finally learned to be sensible after pestering me for a few years, and you finally know that making a scene will lose face." I staggered out of the store, but Otis grabbed my arm. "Don't be stubborn if you're hurt so badly. I'll take you to the hospital." The wound hurt badly, and I didn't intend to make things difficult for myself. When we got to the hospital, I was about to enter the examination room, but Otis pushed me aside. "Let Alina go first." Then he carefully helped Alina into the examination room. Sister Zoe, it's all because I have scar constitution that Otis is so worried about me. Don't mind me. I ignored them and sat quietly to the side. The doctor looked at the almost invisible red mark on Alina's wrist and handed Otis a band-aid with a complicated look. While the doctor was treating my wound, Otis thoughtfully tidied Alina's clothes and hair. As they talked and laughed, they had already decided where to go on their honeymoon. Alina leaned close to Otis happily and was about to kiss him. Otis suddenly turned his head and looked in my direction, as if he had just remembered that I was also in the examination room. Unfortunately, I was concentrating on the doctor and didn't look at him at all. Seeing that I didn't react, Otis became impatient and slapped the table hard. Are you done? Is it necessary to bandage a small wound for so long? As soon as he finished speaking, he grabbed his coat and went out. My wound was stung by the medicine, and my eyes were already red. When he passed by me and saw this, he first looked disgusted, then curled his lips triumphantly. Since I've proposed, I'll definitely marry you. Don't play those tricks with me. Even if you pretend in front of me, be more obedient. He said, contrary to usual, he took a ring out of his pocket and put it on my hand. But I also warn you, Alina is not someone you can touch, and you'd better put away those inappropriate thoughts. If anything happens to Alina, don't blame me for not giving you any face. Without waiting for me to refuse, he ordered the driver to take me back. I sneered and called a taxi. Clearly, he was greedy for Zoe's family property and unwilling to let me go. Yet he pretended to be a poor victim who was beaten up by me. Not long after I got in the car, I saw Alina's social platforms. New gift, finally don't have to wear the old and broken ring anymore. I like it so much. Thanks, Otis. The picture is a set of top luxury jewelry and an old ring. And that ring is exactly the one I'm wearing. I sneered and threw away the ring. The next second, my phone rang. Sister Zoe, can you help us buy a box of condoms? Although you can't be Otis' wife in this life, you have received his dowry after all. So this little favor is not too much, right? 3. So Alina has been reborn too? I've always felt something was off. In my previous life, Alina never came looking for me until I died. But now, without anything happening, they've gone as far as going to bed right in front of me. Unconsciously, I recalled the previous life. After marrying Otis, the Otis family, with the help of the Zoe family's finances, became the richest in J City, with immense influence. The Otis family all knew that this was inseparable from my help, and they reminded Otis to treat me better every few days. So even though I was alone in an empty house after marriage, I didn't notice Otis' dislike for me until after I died, and Otis seamlessly took in Alina. Miss Zoe, may I confirm with you that the custom-made wedding dress Mr. Norbert made for you will be delivered to the old Otis family mansion in South J City tonight? I was a little surprised when the wedding dress shop called. After all, in my previous life, Norbert had refused the marriage and also announced that he was childless. As the son of the old man, it was impossible to have no heir, so the Otis family had no choice but to adopt the branch Otis. How could the person who said he wanted to be childless agree to marry me as soon as I asked? Although I couldn't figure it out, Norbert was definitely better than Otis. I happily asked the wedding dress shop where the dress was placed. The design carefully crafted by Norbert, which was also rushed overnight, filled me with anticipation. At my wedding in the previous life, Otis bought me a style that didn't fit me at all, and I was so sore from being squeezed during the whole wedding. When I arrived at the Otis family, the engagement banquet was almost ready. After greeting the older members of the Otis family, I went straight to the side hall tea room to check on the wedding dress. But before I went in, I heard a voice coming from inside the room. Otis, you're so kind. Knowing that I like dresses, you specially customized one for me. A bad feeling arose in my heart, and I pushed open the door tremblingly. Otis was lying on Alina, panting heavily, his clothes disheveled. Alina was wearing the dress that the wedding dress shop had shown me. The carefully designed dress had the lining underneath cut off, leaving only a piece of thin gauze, ugly and cheap. The wedding dress that Norbert had rushed to make for me was ruined by them. Full of anger, I rushed forward to question them. Why did you take my dress and cut it up like this? Seeing me like this, Alina immediately shrank into Otis's arms, and tears came out. Otis, did I do something wrong? Do I not deserve a dress? Why is my sister so angry? I'll just leave. Otis hugged her tightly and scolded me. Zoe, it's just a dress. What are you going crazy about? It was meant to be worn for me to see anyway. I love to see Alina wearing it because she has a good figure. It's just a few pieces of cloth. I don't care at all. If it wasn't for Alina liking it, I wouldn't even look at it. Just go buy a new one. Don't get in our way here. I was almost amused by him. Who said it was for you to see? It's for my own wedding. Otis sneered disdainfully. Zoe, how long do you want to make a fuss? Isn't your wedding my wedding? Aren't you tired of making a fuss all day long? His eyes were proud and contemptuous. If you keep making a fuss, don't blame me for being ruthless, and you won't even have a wedding then. I'm going to get married, but who said I'm going to marry you? I sneered. Otis frowned. Who else can you marry besides me? Naturally, it's me. As soon as he finished speaking, a cold voice came from outside. Norbert walked in slowly. 4. Norbert is the pillar of the Otis family, and the Otis family's rapid rise in status in the past 2 years is inseparable from his behind-the-scenes planning. Even though his voice was not loud, all the Otis family members were still attracted to him. Otis immediately tidied up his clothes and ran out. What did you just say, Dad? Are you kidding me? Norbert didn't speak, but gently reached out to me. Zoe, come here. Otis's face turned pale, and he frantically winked at me, signaling me not to go. I lowered my head and gently took Norbert's hand. Seeing this scene, the old man of the Otis family smiled so hard he couldn't close his mouth. What a good day for the Otis family today. Hearing Norbert and their conversation, Alina thought that she and Otis had a chance, so she came out and greeted them with a smile. Hello, Grandpa. Hello, Uncle. Marshall, the old man, pulled a long face when he saw Alina. What are you doing bringing a cat or a dog on a day like this? Alina's smile completely froze, and she was hit hard. Otis hugged her lovingly. Grandpa, what you said is too much. Alina is my cousin, so she is also a member of the Otis family. Why can't she come? The Otis family members all shook their heads, and no one paid any attention to them. At the beginning of the banquet, Otis pulled me aside. Zoe, you're too jealous. You can't bear to see me and Alina being good, so you seduce my dad. Do you have any shame? If you don't be honest, I won't even give you a wedding. Before I could speak, Marshall, the old man, immediately got angry. What are you doing pulling Zoe? Today is Zoe's engagement day. Do you understand manners? Otis immediately put on an obedient look. I understand. I've already discussed it with Zoe. Today is just a dinner. We'll take care of the marriage certificate and the wedding ourselves. I guarantee you'll be satisfied. All the Otis family members looked at him, their eyes full of surprise and contempt. Marshall, the old man, tapped his cane. Otis, can you arrange your little dad's marriage? Get out if you talk nonsense again. 5. Otis was stunned for 2 seconds. Isn't today my engagement party with Zoe? When is Dad getting married? Marshall, the old man, picked up a fruit from the table and threw it at him. You bastard! How did the family pick such a scoundrel like you? If you want a wife, go find one yourself. Today is your father's engagement party with Zoe. After saying that, he came over and patted my head with a smile. Zoe, you fulfilled a big wish for this old man. If anyone in the Otis family makes you unhappy, just tell Dad, and I'll take care of him for you. Otis couldn't believe his ears. Grandpa, what are you saying? Whose engagement party is it today? A cold glint flashed in Norbert's eyes as he walked over to me and pushed him away. It's my engagement party with Zoe. How is that possible? How is that possible? Otis, as if betrayed, grabbed my arm in disbelief, but was slapped away by Norbert. Otis, look where you are before you go crazy. Don't forget, you were just adopted by me. I can kick you out anytime. Otis reluctantly retracted his hand, staring at me fixedly, but could only suppress all the emotions in his heart. When Marshall, the old man, saw that he was finally honest, he continued to speak. Throughout the entire engagement party, Otis stared at me without blinking. And no matter how much Alina tried to cling to him, he ignored her. When the party was over, the Otis family members left in twos and threes, and Norbert was also called away by Marshall, the old man. Otis immediately ran over and pressed me down on the seat. "Zoe, when did you hook up with Norbert? You betrayed me. How could you marry someone else?" I shrank back and distanced myself from him. "What does it have to do with you who I marry? And where is there any betrayal between us?" He grabbed my arm and lifted me up. "Zoe, what are you joking about? You clearly can't live without me. How could you possibly marry Norbert?" I struggled hard. "I've told you before, it's all your one-sided imagination." He forced me to look at him. "Then all the times you chased after me saying you liked me were all fake." I frowned in pain, but refused to show any weakness. "Otis, you have no heart. You don't deserve my love anymore. Aren't you very annoyed that I keep pestering you? Now that I've set you free, why aren't you happy?" Otis let go of me in disbelief and took 2 steps back, covering his chest. "How could you possibly marry someone else? In the last life, you did it for me." Then, he suddenly became confident again and held my face in a doting manner. "I see. Are you angry that I was with Alina in the tea room just now? I won't do that in front of you again in the future. And when we get married, I will definitely not show off with her in front of you. I've already made so many concessions, don't make trouble anymore." 6. I was utterly shocked by his shamelessness, and I couldn't understand how I could have fallen for such a man. My husband should never be with another woman. "Otis, I warn you, I'm your stepmom now. If you don't understand human language, don't pester me, or don't blame me for being ruthless. Then guess if Norbert will want a dirty woman?" Saying that, he took advantage of the fact that no one was around and tried to tear my clothes off. I hurriedly blocked him, but my strength couldn't compare to his, and I closed my eyes in despair as my clothes were about to be torn. But before Otis could tear them, he was kicked away. Norbert patted my back reassuringly, signaling me not to worry. "Otis, since you don't have us as your parents in your eyes, then from today on, you are no longer my stepson. I will freeze all the Otis family assets in your hands. And don't even think about spending another penny of the Otis family's money until you repent." Otis completely lost his mind, and he didn't even care about Norbert, and he sneered with a sarcastic smile. "Norbert, how dare you? Do you even have the face to say you're my parents? Norbert, you're robbing your son's wife. Are you worthy of being a father? Everyone in J City knows that she, Zoe, is my woman, and there are countless romantic stories between us, stepdad. Which one do you want to hear?" Norbert was really angry and directly grabbed the ashtray and smashed it on his head. "A foul mouth will pay the price. If you don't get out, all the Otis family's assets will have nothing to do with you, and I will have people take back all the dividends in your hands." I looked at his heaving chest and handed him a bottle of water with heartache. "Don't be angry, I'm fine." Otis looked at me hopefully, and when he found that I wasn't looking at him at all, he collapsed in despair. Alina had been waiting outside for a long time, and when she came in and found Otis, she wanted to take him back, but Otis pushed her away and roared at her to get out. In the car, I looked at Norbert and spoke thoughtfully. "Don't listen to his nonsense. I did like him, but I never had anything with him." Norbert kissed me gently on the forehead and held me in his arms. "I believe you." I was melted by his tenderness and completely at a loss. Norbert suddenly coughed a few times and pretended to cover his chest. That bastard made my chest hurt, and I've been so busy with business lately. I don't know who can take care of me. He looked up at me aggrieved. I couldn't help but laugh. If he didn't have anyone to take care of him, the Otis family could really be removed from J City. My heart softened, and I patted his back comfortingly, imitating him. "Then I can only wrong you to let me take care of you for a while?" A cunning flashed in his eyes. I knew my wife was the best. 7. After that day, I officially moved into Norbert's guest room. Through getting along, we became more and more convinced of each other, like long-lost lovers, taking care of each other. It wasn't until then that I realized how much of my heart I had given away in vain. But not long after, I received a congratulatory message from a friend. "Zoe, you're amazing, you even got Otis?" But what's October 17th? Is it your wedding date with him? Norbert, as the next heir of the Otis family, paid great attention to his personal privacy, so he planned to announce our relationship when the wedding was approaching. Plus, I had been chasing after Otis before, and everyone around me thought I still liked him. But how could they suddenly say such things? My friends sent dozens of pictures one after another, and I opened them one by one, surprised to find that Otis was making a high-profile declaration of love on the electronic screen of J City Tower. My name and his were connected by a heart, filling the entire screen, and it stayed there for 2 whole days. All the content on his social accounts became related to me, and the top one was the same one, Han. Zoe, October 17th. I'll be waiting for you for the rest of my life. Looking at the screen full of blessings and comments, I only felt noisy. I had lost all my self-esteem for him, but he treated me like garbage that was clinging to him. Now that he has really lost me, he comes to show his deep affection. The funniest thing is he thought October 17th was my birthday, but I told him more than once that my actual birthday was October 7th. I can't see the value of such a pieced-together deep affection. The next morning, I was about to go to work. As soon as I got to the garage, I was blinded by a car with its high beams on. I heard the roar of the engine and instinctively took a few steps back, dodging a collision. Zoe, you water-spirited bitch. You've hooked up with Norbert, and you still want to hook Otis. He's going to break up with me for you. I've been reborn, and I can finally be with him. Why do I still have to be suppressed by you? I'll never let you have a good time. Roaring, Alina turned the car around and rammed into me again. My vision blurred, and when I came back to my senses, I was already being protected in my arms. With a muffled thud, Otis climbed out of the car with difficulty, checking my condition worriedly, while his right arm was bent in a strange way, making sure I wasn't hurt. Otis tore Alina's hair and pulled her out of the car. Who gave you the guts to hurt Zoe? You really think I can't do anything to you, don't you? Saying that, he hit Alina several times on the car, and soon Alina collapsed on the ground, letting out a shrill laugh. Otis, of course you can. You can even secretly abort my child. What else can't you do? I'm telling you. I've already told everyone that Zoe is interfering in other people's relationships and seducing your dad to take over. Soon you Otis will have no choice but me, ha 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 ha. Otis slapped her, completely shutting Alina up. You bitch. Then, he looked at me nervously, smiled ingratiatingly. Zoe, you know what kind of person I am. That child could never be mine. She's blackmailing me. I really haven't betrayed you. As for the rumors, as long as you're with me, no one will believe her. As he spoke, he tried to hug me. I frowned and avoided him. It's other people's business what others say. You don't need to tell me about the things you've done yourself. You're injured, go to the hospital, I'll pay for it. It has nothing to do with me. I opened the car door and drove away. Otis wanted to stop my car, but Alina grabbed his broken arm from behind, and the two of them fought each other completely. After that day, the Otis family directly expelled Otis from the family tree and took back all his positions and shares. When his biological parents found out, they broke one of his legs. Alina originally wanted to tie herself to the Otis family and get a few million in compensation. But the messages she sent out didn't cause any ripples, and they were all quickly deleted. She was unwilling, and she told everyone that I was a homewrecker and that Norbert allowed his wife to seduce his son. But before the word spread, she was sent to a mental hospital. When my friends told me about these things, they laughed so hard their stomachs hurt. Zoe, how could anyone be so stupid to make up such a story? But she's actually mentally ill. I didn't really see it before. I smiled and said nothing. 8. I was a little surprised when Norbert told me he was taking a vacation. There's no such thing as taking a vacation in his position. He's just worried about me and wants to make me happy. I held his hand tightly. Norbert, I wish we had met earlier. He looked seriously into my eyes. For me, being with you is the best arrangement of fate. On October 7th, he suddenly invited me to a music restaurant. A cello was playing the Wanderer's song, my favorite piece, but even Otis didn't know it. A little boy suddenly ran over and handed me a delicate gold-embossed envelope. When I opened it, It turned out to be a love letter. I was surprised, and the lights in the restaurant suddenly dimmed, leaving only Norbert and me illuminated. Zoe, happy birthday. I don't want our relationship to become a business marriage, so I think I still owe you a formal confession. Zoe, I like you, and I want to invite you to spend the rest of your life with me. Will you marry me? He took out a large bouquet of roses from somewhere, knelt on one knee, and held up a shiny diamond ring with the other hand. I do, I like you too. I took the ring and completely fell into his arms. There were countless cheers around us, witnessing the beginning of our happiness. A sharp voice sounded, Norbert, Zoe is mine, don't try to take her away. I turned around and saw Otis being pressed to the ground by the security guard. His arms and legs were in casts, and the security guard looked at Norbert in embarrassment. Otis, since the last lesson wasn't enough for you, then from now on, you have nothing to do with all the positions and shares of the Otis family. Otis struggled, his eyes red. Norbert, I don't care about anything in the Otis family. What you can do, I can do too. Zoe, give me some time, and I will prove to you my heart for you. Have you forgotten how much you love me? How can you bear to leave me? The onlookers who didn't know the situation started to whisper, but when I looked at him, there was no fluctuation in my eyes. If he had given me even a little bit of sincerity in the previous life, we wouldn't have come to this point. His deep affection now may be because of unwillingness, or because of anger, but definitely not because he loves me. Even if he really turned back, I couldn't give him another chance. Otis, we have no confession, no proposal, no ambiguity between us, we never started. If you really want me to be well, then please stay away from me and my husband in the future. From now on, I hope you will never bother me again, and my lover Norbert. After saying that, I smiled and reached out, letting Norbert put the ring on for me. Otis seemed to lose all his strength, completely gave up struggling, and was dragged away by the security guard. 9. On our wedding day, our friends looked at Norbert beside me in surprise. It wasn't until I kissed him on the lips that they completely believed that I really fell in love with Norbert. After marriage, the Otis family and the Zoe family cooperated deeply, and Norbert, with his own vision, seized the opportunity to lay out the energy industry, leading both families to the peak when the opportunity exploded. After being kicked out of the Otis family, Otis wanted to start a business with the help of his biological parents. But the first attempt lost most of his capital, and now the whole family owes tens of millions. I heard from a friend that the last time I saw him, he was squatting on a roadside stall, eating the fried rice he despised the most, but he disappeared in a blink of an eye. After that, I never heard any news of him. While I was confinement, I looked at Norbert, who was cooking for me and the baby. It's so good I married you. He paused, put down what he was doing, and walked over to me. You went to J-City, no? One middle school for junior high, right? I looked at him puzzled. Before I went abroad to study, I was bullied at school. Originally, I thought I was going to study abroad, so there was no need to argue with them, but a little girl ran out and chased everyone away from me. I coldly and hypocritically blamed her for being nosy, but she didn't care and said that I was so beautiful that I shouldn't be bullied. My memory returned to the familiar node, and I realized that our fate had been tied so deeply long ago. From then on, I remembered her, but unfortunately, when I returned to China, I heard that she had someone she liked. Although I was sad, I didn't want to disrupt her happiness. So when my father said he wanted to find me a partner, I told him that I wanted to be childless and rejected all marriages. When I was choosing a stepson, I deliberately chose him, and later I just wanted to focus on fighting, so that you could live happily. But when I knew that he was not good to you, I began to feel unwilling. That day when I went to propose marriage in person, I originally wanted to tell you these things, but I didn't expect you to marry me initiative. He gently wiped the tears from the corner of my eyes with his fingertips. So, I'm really glad I can marry you. I looked at him, my eyes infinitely gentle. Where is there any peace and quiet in the world? It turns out that even the stability of the previous life was exchanged for this man's life. Norbert, I love you. The sunlight poured down, and we were completely immersed in the quiet happiness.